What if everything you think you know about human evolution was only the surface? What if the true story of our species, yours, mine, everyone's, was far deeper, more uncertain, and more astonishing than what you were taught? What you are about to discover will not only change how you see the past, it will also make you rethink the present and the future of what we are as a species. Welcome to CronoEarth, the channel where time is not a line, but a map guiding us to the heart of great civilizations, to the most ancient origins, and to the secrets that still pulse beneath our feet. If you are passionate about deep history, archaeology, evolution, and the mysteries still alive in our blood, this is your place. Subscribe now, give this video a like, and stay until the end, because today we are going to unearth the most remote beginnings of modern humans. And believe me, there are facts you won't find in textbooks, but that reveal truths we should all know. Now let's begin. The story of Homo sapiens does not start in a cave lit by torches, nor in a stone city with towering temples. It begins much earlier, in Africa, around 300,000 years ago, a vast, wild, and changing continent where life flourished among volcanoes, savannas, deserts, and humid forests, a world where we were not unique, we were one among many. Back then, the human lineage was not made up of a single species, but of a complex mosaic of close relatives, all walking the same earth. There were the Neanderthals, inhabiting the cold climates of Europe with robust bodies and large brains. The Denisovans, of whom we still know very little, left genetic traces in peoples of East Asia and Oceania. Farther south, the tiny and enigmatic Homo florensis, nicknamed the Hobbit, survived on the island of Flores, Indonesia. And there were others still more mysterious, like Homo naledi or Homo luzonensis, whose recent discoveries continue to challenge everything we thought we knew about our origins. In that shared stage, Homo sapiens was just another branch on the great evolutionary tree of humanity, without guarantees, without supremacy, without a destined future. And yet, something different was beginning to take shape, not in body size, not in brute strength, but within the skull, in the architecture of thought, in the invisible spark of a consciousness that had not yet fully awakened, but was already glimmering timidly in gestures, glances, and tools. The oldest fossils we recognize today as Homo sapiens were found in Jebel Irhoud, Morocco, and date back about 300,000 years. These remains do not show a fully modern human, but neither are they archaic. Their rounder skulls, their finer faces, speak of a transition of humanity in formation. That transition was not sudden. For millennia, Homo sapiens evolved as part of a network of populations spread across the African continent. Far from the myth of a single Eden, current genetic studies reveal that our species was born from multiple interconnected groups, migrating, mixing, and sharing knowledge. Human evolution was not a straight line, but a weave, a braid of migrations, adaptations, and invisible crossings that shaped who we are today. And what truly defines us is not only the shape of our bones, nor the structure of our DNA. It is our unprecedented adaptability, our biological and cultural plasticity. From the very beginning, we were able to live in the harshest environments, from dense jungles to wind-battered coasts, from scorching deserts to towering mountains. Where other human species disappeared, we endured, but it would be a mistake to think that makes us superior. We are not the end of an evolutionary ladder, nor the pinnacle of creation. We are, simply, the only human species that survived, and that was due as much to our adaptability as to chance, abrupt climate shifts, natural catastrophes, and also interbreeding with other human species, leaving indelible marks in our genome. Today, we carry in our DNA fragments of Neanderthals and Denisovans. We are not pure. We are hybrids of time. Each of us is the product of thousands of generations of trial, error, struggle, and survival, a silent legacy that still breathes in our bodies, in our languages, in our imagination. And just when it seemed we were not so different from other humans, something happened that would change everything. Symbolic thought, the capacity to imagine the invisible, to create myths, to project futures, and to remember pasts we never lived. But that is another story. For a long time, the image of Homo sapiens as the only human on Earth dominated our vision of the past. But reality was very different. For thousands of years, we shared the planet with at least 5 or 6 other human species. And not only did we see them, we lived alongside them. We crossed paths. We crossed genes. The Neanderthals, for example, were not clumsy beasts or hairy primitives as cinema once portrayed them. They lived in Europe and Western Asia for over 300,000 years. They mastered fire, crafted tools, buried their dead, and and today we know they even had rudimentary forms of art and symbols. They were intelligent, resilient, human, though different. The Denisovans, by contrast, remain a mystery. We know them only from fragments of bone and teeth found in a Siberian cave, yet their genetic trace appears in the peoples of Melanesia, China, Tibet, and even the Philippines. We don't see them, but they live in us, and they were not the only ones. Homo floresiensis, with its tiny stature and small brain, survived in isolation on an island. Homo luzonensis, discovered in the Philippines, adds even more pieces to this puzzle, and there are still genetic echoes of other archaic humans we have not fully identified. So, what was it like to encounter them? What happened when sapiens met Neanderthals, or sapiens met Denisovans? For a long time it was believed there was only conflict, that sapiens were responsible for their extinction. But today we know the story was more complex. It wasn't always war. There was mixing, interaction, mutual learning, and hybridization. More than 98% of Neanderthal DNA is identical to that of modern humans, and all non-African humans today carry between 1 and 2% of their DNA. In other words, they did not vanish entirely. They live in us. The same is true for the Denisovans. Certain genetic adaptations that allow Tibetans to live at extreme altitudes come directly from them. We are quite literally a human mosaic, a hybrid species, woven with fragments of others who no longer walk this world but who still speak to us through our blood. And yet the question remains, why did we survive, and they did not? The answer is not simple. It was not just about strength, nor even intelligence. It was likely a combination of factors: a greater ability to cooperate in large groups, more complex language, which allowed us to narrate, to plan, to connect, more versatile technology, and yes, also climate chance. Droughts, ice ages, and radical environmental shifts struck the regions where our closest relatives lived. While they endured in limited zones, we expanded. Where they depended on specific niches, we adapted to all. And when the world changed, they could not keep pace. We did. We did not win a war. We survived a process, and their memory was fused into our bodies, like an ancient whisper still carried in every cell. Did that fact surprise you? Then wait, because what comes next will leave you speechless. Leave us a comment with the phrase, "I carry history in my DNA," and tell us if you knew that Homo sapiens lived with, and even interbred with, other human species. But don't go anywhere. Keep watching, because the data we are about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about what it really means to be human. We are about to step into a key moment, the breaking point that transformed us forever, the spark that ignited symbolic thought, art, gods, myths, and language, an evolutionary leap that changed history, and that still burns within you. About 70,000 years ago, something changed our species forever. It was not a change in the body, but in the mind. It was the beginning of what we call the cognitive revolution, a silent yet momentous leap that allowed us to think symbolically, to imagine the invisible, and to communicate with complex language. This new way of thinking gave us tools no other species had ever developed: to tell stories, to transmit knowledge, to share beliefs. Through language, humans not only named the world, but interpreted it, ritualized it, and reinvented it. Thus were born art, symbolic burials, myths, and the first forms of spirituality. Cave paintings, fertility figurines, and decorated graves speak of an inner world that was beginning to awaken. But this new brain did not only dream, it organized. Language allowed us to speak about others, even when they were not present. What we now call gossip was in reality a social technology, one that enabled us to form large and complex communities, where reputation and shared narratives bound people together beyond blood ties. From this emerged clans, invisible norms, the first social structures. Our collective imagination, able to invent gods, spirits, symbols, and rules, became the foundation of the human world. The cognitive revolution was not a single event, but a process, a spark that ignited a fire that still burns. It gave us art, religion, love, fear, power, and with all of that, the ability to create real worlds out of invisible ideas. If this journey made you see humanity with new eyes, leave your mark in the comments with the phrase, "I imagine, therefore I exist." We want to know how many are here, connected by this story that belongs not only to the past, but to all of us. Don't go just yet. The most revealing part is still to come. There are still secrets of Homo sapiens waiting to surprise you. For tens of thousands of years, Homo sapiens lived as nomads. Their days were marked by movement, by observing the land, by hunting, gathering, and following the seasons. There was no property, no city, no kings. The world was traveled, not owned. The land was not divided by boundaries or fences, but shared among those who understood it as a living part of the whole. Yet around 12,000 years ago, in different regions of the planet, independently, yet almost simultaneously, something began to change. Small human communities, instead of following food, began to attract it. They learned to plant certain crops, to domesticate animals, and to build specific tools for cultivating and storing what they needed. This was what we later called the agricultural revolution. In the Fertile Crescent, in what is now the Middle East, wheat was domesticated. In Mesoamerica, maize. In Asia, rice and millet. In the Andes, the potato. In each case, a human group discovered they could alter nature to make it more predictable. And on the surface, this change seemed to represent progress. Agriculture allowed for the production of more food per unit of land, which in turn led to population growth. With less need to move, permanent settlements began to emerge, then villages. But with that stability also came transformations that would forever change social structures and humanity's balance with nature. Where once there had been relative equality among the members of a nomadic group, sedentarization brought accumulation. Whoever had more arable land or more animals could generate surpluses. Whoever controlled the granaries also controlled the group's decisions. The first leaders were born, not from physical strength, but from administration. Hierarchies emerged. Privileges marked differences between those who worked the land and those who ruled it. New concepts appeared as well. Private property, inheritance, debt. Agriculture did not just sow cereals, it sowed the foundations of structured power. But this supposed advance came with a cost that is rarely mentioned. The human body, adapted for hundreds of thousands of years to the nutritional variety of hunting and gathering, suffered under the agricultural diet. In the skeletal remains of early farming societies, we see a clear decline in stature, an increase in bone diseases, cavities, anemia, and nutritional deficiencies. Life became more predictable, yes, but also more rigid, more vulnerable, more demanding. In addition, once settled, communities became more exposed to contagious diseases. Living close to the animals they domesticated brought new infections. Population growth fueled their spread. Thus, many historical epidemics, and even modern ones, are indirect children of that great shift. And more, cultivating land meant defending it. Territorial conflicts were born, wars over access to water, fertile valleys, and trade routes. Agricultural expansion, which allowed more people to be sustained, also made collapse more dangerous when drought or soil exhaustion arrived. None of this means that the agricultural revolution was a mistake. Without it, there would be no cities, no temples, no libraries, no writing, no scientific advances. But neither can it be idealized. Agriculture brought progress, yes, but also inequality, control, exploitation, structural hunger, and organized violence. Many researchers today argue that the true evolutionary leap was not when we learned to plant, but when we accepted living under the rules that planting imposed, because now we needed not only food, we needed protection, coordination, organization, religion, punishment, law, government, and that was the beginning of something far greater, civilization. When humans learned to cultivate the land and became sedentary, they not only changed their relationship with the environment, they also changed their relationship with time, with one another, and with themselves. The ability to produce food in one place allowed some villages to grow, and as they grew, they required norms, rules, coordination. It was then that new forms of social organization emerged, more structured, more hierarchical, more permanent. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes, different human cultures, separated by thousands of kilometers, and with no contact between them, began to build something radically new, civilization. For the first time, a human group established a fixed center from which collective life was administered. There appeared the first temples, built not only as religious spaces. Priests no longer merely mediated with the gods. They also organized the agricultural calendar, directed grain distribution, and controlled the narrative of what was permitted or sacred. Population growth brought new challenges: how to maintain order, how to resolve conflicts, how to store and distribute resources. Thus were born the first bureaucracies, with scribes recording quantities, taxes, and dates. The invention of writing, which we now see as a symbol of wisdom, was in reality born as a tool to manage the practical: accounting, property, control. With writing came something deeper: collective memory. History no longer had to be passed only by word of mouth. Now it could be fixed on tablets, stones, and walls. Origin stories, royal genealogies, divine laws, foundational myths, all were recorded, and that meant power. Where once leadership was fluid and tied to personal prestige, now kings appeared, sacred lineages, empires. Power ceased to depend on the community and became embodied in specific figures who were both men and symbols, intermediaries between heaven and earth. Cities began to reflect this new structure: zones for rulers, elevated temples, neighborhoods divided by trades, and walls that marked what was inside and what was outside. Civilization brought wonders: monumental architecture, advanced astronomy, complex legal systems, large-scale trade. But it also brought structural inequality, forced labor, exploitation of resources, organized violence, and systematic wars. In the first cities, splendor and misery lived side by side, knowledge and repression, art and oppression. And yet this model triumphed because it allowed thousands of people to be organized under a shared vision, a worldview sustained by myths, rituals, laws, punishments, and rewards, a promise of order amid chaos. Since then, humanity has never stopped building civilizations, nor debating between the benefits they bring and the costs they impose. And if you've made it this far, you are already in the middle of this journey. That means this story is touching you in some way. Support us so we can keep telling it. Subscribe to CronoEarth, activate the bell, like this video, and share it with someone who also wonders where we come from. And leave us your opinion in the comments. Do you think the price of order has been too high? Stay until the end of the video, because what comes next will reveal facts not taught in textbooks, and it may just change the way you see humanity. For most of its history, humanity lived in a world without writing. Everything that was known, from how to light a fire to the myths of origin, was transmitted orally, from generation to generation. But that knowledge was fragile. It depended on memory, repetition, ritual. A forgotten word could mean a story lost forever. And then, just over 5,000 years ago, in different parts of the world, a radical idea emerged: to leave a mark, to carve symbols into stone, clay, or bone, to encode sounds, words, meanings. Writing did not appear as a form of artistic or philosophical expression. It was born, above all, from a practical need to count, to keep record of harvests, taxes, debts, births, sacrifices, names of kings. In the first cities, with their growing complexity, spoken words were no longer enough. Thus arose systems such as cuneiform in Mesopotamia, hieroglyphs in Egypt, Chinese characters, Mayan glyphs, each with its own logic, its own aesthetics, its own link to the sacred, but all with the same goal: to store memory outside the human body. The invention of writing changed everything. It allowed knowledge to outlive the wise man. It allowed laws to be replicated. It allowed myths to take fixed form. Humanity, for the first time, had external memory, but it also carried something more subtle: the power to decide what was remembered and what was forgotten. Only a few could read and write, and those few defined history. From then on, writing became a tool of transmission and of control. With it came libraries, official history, imperial archives, and little by little, words no longer died in the air. Human beings were no longer only living memory. They became preserved word, past engraved, and future imagined. Long before there were stone temples or sacred scriptures, humans were already looking to the sky for answers. It was not enough to know that the sun rose each day, or that rain came with the change of seasons. There was something in the human heart, a mix of fear, wonder, and longing, that demanded deeper explanations. Spirituality was born, most likely, as a response to awe. Thunder, death, the full moon, childbirth, all those phenomena carried an inexplicable force. And that force, sooner or later, became presence, intention, will. Thus arose the first spirits, gods, ancestors, invisible guardians. They were not abstract ideas. They were real. They were felt, feared, invoked. They were part of the very fabric of daily life. At first, the relationship was intimate, direct. Humans asked, offered, gave thanks. Rituals were not spectacles. They were vital acts. To light a fire, to sow, to hunt, to heal, each could have a sacred dimension. Over time, that spirituality became organized. Some men and women began to specialize in bonds with the invisible: shamans, sages, visionaries. They were interpreters between the visible world and the hidden one, and their word carried weight, not because they imposed, but because they connected the community with something greater. As societies grew, the gods also changed. They were no longer only forces of nature. They became figures with personality, myths, and lineages. Pantheons were born, origin stories, cosmic wars, founding heroes. Religion ceased to be only a spiritual experience and became also a social structure. Temples rose at the center of cities. Rituals became public, massive, regulated. The relationship with the divine became institutionalized, and with it came religious power. no longer only a bond with nature, but a system to sustain order, to explain destiny, to legitimize authority, to impose conduct. And yet, deep down, beyond hierarchies and doctrines, spirituality remained a profound expression of something human, the need to find meaning, to not be alone in the face of death, pain, mystery. The gods were not only cultural creations, they were, and still are, mirrors of the human soul, reflections of what we fear, what we long for, what we do not fully understand. And although the names of those gods have changed, their function has not disappeared. We still seek transcendence, we still seek comfort, we still seek answers, because we remain human, and the invisible still speaks to us. Had you ever stopped to think about how the first gods were born? Did you know that before organized religions, we already lived surrounded by symbols and sacred forces? Tell us in the comments if this topic surprised you, and write the phrase, "I listen to the invisible." That way we'll know how many of you are still here, walking with us through this deep history that is also yours. And the most revealing part is still to come. We continue forward. As the first civilizations grew, so did their need for stability. Maintaining the cohesion of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people was no simple task. And for that social body to function, someone had to establish order, and someone had to pay the price. From very ancient times, societies understood that power needed legitimacy. Strength or wealth alone were not enough. The right to rule had to be justified, and for that nothing was more effective than linking the ruler to the sacred. Thus were born divine kings, sacred chiefs, lineages blessed by the gods. They were not mere authorities, they were channels between humanity and the cosmos. Their word carried weight, not because of their voice, but because it was said to come from above. But to maintain that relationship, it had to be fed. And what was offered was not only incense or prayers, it was blood. Sacrifice, human or animal, was not gratuitous cruelty. It was an extreme expression of the spiritual logic of the age. For the universe to remain in balance, someone had to give up something valuable. Corn grows if it is given energy. The sun rises if it is honored. The community survives if someone is offered. In many ancient peoples, sacrifice was even considered an honor. The body of the sacrificed was not seen as destruction, but as a bridge to the eternal. They became mediator, living offering, renewer of the world. And yet, hidden in that act was also a political reality, the power to decide who dies and who lives, who represents the community, and who sustains it with their body. Sacrifice, then, was at once ritual and control, spirituality and government, faith and power. Around this logic, much of social order was built. Calendars marked not only the harvest, but the days of blood. Temples were not only places of worship, but also of judgment. Law and religion intertwined until they became inseparable. The result was a form of cohesion that combined belief, obedience, and sacred fear. Order was sustained by symbols, but also by bodies. And so for centuries, human history advanced through purification rites, renewal ceremonies, exemplary punishments, and promises of balance. Today, many of those practices seem distant, archaic, incomprehensible. But their logic still lives on in our institutions, in our structures, in our ways of thinking about duty, merit, redemption, and guilt. Because even if blood is no longer spilled atop temples, the bond between power and sacrifice still echoes in the depths of the human soul. Had you ever thought that sacrifice was not only an act of faith, but also a way of organizing power? Did you know that behind temples and ceremonies, there was a structure designed to hold a people together? Leave us your opinion in the comments with the phrase, "Order has a price," and tell us if this part of human history felt revealing to you. There are still many valuable secrets of Homo sapiens to uncover, and the best is yet to come. As societies grew, so did their needs. No longer was it enough for a community to survive on what it could produce on its own. Fertile lands, rare metals, salt, jade, spices. These were resources unevenly distributed, and so exchange was born. Trade did not begin as a sophisticated economic system, but as a practical need to give something in return for something else. To exchange not only objects but trust, knowledge, culture. From early times, small barter routes connected distant villages. Over time, those routes became roads, caravans, ports, and market cities. Trade did not only move goods, it moved ideas, religions, languages, technologies. Through exchange, bronze spread, alphabets were shared, myths traveled beyond their place of origin. But where there is wealth, there is also greed, and what began as cooperation often turned into conflict. Routes controlled by a few, abusive taxes, raids disguised as exploration. Trade, then, was also a form of power, a network that could unite, but also suffocate. And yet without it, the world would never have been connected. Trade was the first truly global system. Long before modern globalization, there were already networks linking oceans, deserts, and mountains. Every ancient object found far from its place of origin, a Mesopotamian seal in the Indus Valley, a piece of Chinese jade in a Scythian tomb, is silent proof of that deep human connection, woven by need, desire, and possibility. Homo sapiens is, without doubt, one of the most successful species ever to walk the earth. We have built cities, mastered fire, traveled to space, decoded DNA, and created entire worlds through imagination alone. But that same ingenuity that carried us so far has also brought us to the edge of the abyss. Throughout history, we have shown an extraordinary capacity for adaptation and a dangerous tendency toward destruction. We have cut down forests that cannot be replanted. We have driven species to extinction that will never return. We have transformed climate, landscape, oceans, sometimes in the name of progress, sometimes out of ambition, and sometimes simply by failing to understand the consequences of our actions. It was not always this way. For thousands of years, humans lived in balance with their environment, but with the rise of intensive agriculture, cities, property, and consumption, that balance was broken. Knowledge grew faster than wisdom, and power faster than empathy. We are the only species capable of asking, "Who am I?" and at the same time, of ignoring the destruction left in our own footsteps. This is not about guilt, but about awareness, because we are also capable of reflection, of change, of imagining new paths. Every mistake our species has made has left a scar, but also a lesson. The story of Homo sapiens is not just a series of conquests, it is a chain of decisions. Some lifted us higher, others tested us, and that story is not over. Have you ever wondered whether the true danger to humanity is ourselves? Leave us your reflection with the phrase, "I am part of the problem and part of the solution." We are reaching the end of this journey. But before we close, some of the most surprising facts about our species remain to be revealed. Stay until the very last minute, and if this journey through the history of Homo sapiens has resonated with you, subscribe to CronoEarth, hit the like button, and activate the bell. Your support allows us to continue exploring the footprints that made us human, and telling those stories that in some way are also yours. For more than 300,000 years, we were Homo sapiens. But today, something is changing. Our biology, our minds, even our environment, no longer transform at the natural rhythm of evolution. Now we are the ones shaping evolution, consciously, and often, without knowing where it will lead. Never before has a species had so much power over its own destiny. We control genes, design algorithms, manipulate information, prolong life, connect minds to machines. Are we still human, or are we becoming something new? Some call it transhumanism, others posthumanism. But beyond the terms, one thing is certain: we are crossing an invisible frontier. For the first time, evolution no longer depends on natural selection, but on technological, economic, and political decisions. Smartphones have changed the way we think, remember, and relate. Artificial intelligence can now write, create images, make decisions. Gene editing like CRISPR allows us to alter the DNA of embryos. Virtual reality, the metaverse, neuroscience, implants, are blurring the lines between the biological and the artificial. We are entering a stage where we may cease to be only sapiens and become something hybrid, longer-lived, more connected, perhaps more powerful, but also more vulnerable. Because every tool has a price, and every leap brings vertigo, we face ethical, environmental, and existential dilemmas without precedent. Who decides what it means to improve the human being? Can we prevent a divide between those with access to these technologies and those left behind? And if one day we create something that thinks better than us, what will remain of who we were? There are no easy answers, only urgent questions. The future is not written in stone, it is in our hands, and perhaps the greatest challenge is not survival, but remembering what made us human in the first place: empathy, imagination, the bond with life. Can you imagine a future where we are no longer Homo sapiens? Do you believe what comes next is evolution or a rupture? Write it in the comments with the phrase, "I am the bridge between two worlds." That way we'll know there are still those who remember the past, while daring to imagine what is coming. We have arrived at the end of this journey. But more than a closing, this is the conclusion we want to leave you with. Of all the creatures that have walked the earth, we are the only one that asks who it is. The only one that looks to the past in search of meaning, and to the future as a mirror, yet without shape. We are not the strongest, nor the fastest, but we carry within us a shared history that stretches across millennia, an unbroken chain of memories, fears, discoveries, and dreams. From the first footprints in Africa to the digital fingerprints on a satellite, we are narrators of ourselves. We learn to hunt, and then to sow, to count time, to name the gods, to raise empires, and to watch them fall. We were fire in the darkness, stone on the mountain, ink on papyrus. We were ash and dust, and we began again. Throughout this history, we changed, we mutated, we adapted, and sometimes we also forgot. But in every corner of this planet there is something of us. A word carved, a seed planted, an idea that crossed seas. And no matter how far we move toward uncertain futures, one thing still beats strongly within us: the desire to understand ourselves, to remember what we are, to imagine what we could become. If you have made it this far, thank you. Thank you for allowing yourself to see history, not as a list of dates, but as a living reflection of your own path. Because to understand Homo sapiens is not only to look back, it is to learn to look within, to that corner where the spark that made us different still burns. Because as long as there is a voice that longs to understand, a gaze that seeks beyond, and a hand ready to write the next page, the story of Homo sapiens will remain alive. We will see each other again, very soon, in another time, in another land, but with the same questions that brought us here. That's all been well for us. See you on the next trip.